I don't think reading goals actually make people better readers. They certainly make people faster readers, and they can make people anxious readers. And sometimes they can make people stop reading altogether. Because when the goal is quantity, the experience of reading becomes secondary. So instead of talking about how many books you should read this year, I want to talk about how to set reading goals that add depth and coherence and meaning to your reading life. So every year, especially around January, reading goals kind of start to look the same. We see a lot of these videos pop up online on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. People talk about how many books they're going to read. They talk about how many pages they're going to read. Some people even talk about how fast they're going to read these books. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. It sounds like a bit of a challenge, and we might think, well, that's good. And of course, I have to say reading is good. Anything that gets people reading is good. I'm not saying these are terrible things, but I think this kind of traditional reading goal is actually kind of limiting, which is kind of ironic. And when you have this kind of goal of how many books you're going to read, you kind of miss the point of reading. Most of these goals are quantitative. They reward speed, they reward volume, but they don't reward attention, and they certainly don't reward depth. They kind of turn reading into something that you complete, like a task, like, a certain number of workouts that you're going to get in every week, every month, every year. And it kind of shifts reading away from something that you actually think about. And that's why so many people actually end up feeling burned out. You see this a lot when people start making bookish content on YouTube in particular. People get burned out, they kind of get stalled, or they start to feel unsatisfied. And that's because they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves to read at a certain speed or to read a certain number of books. So I want to suggest a really simple shift. Change the goal, not how much you read, but how and what you read. So here's kind of the core idea that I'm putting forth here. And I'm talking about moving goals away from quantitative towards qualitative. Instead of asking, how many books will I read this year? Ask questions like, what kind of books do I want to spend my time reading? Or what direction do I want my reading life to move in? Or what am I curious about? What new ideas do I want to try to pursue as a reader? This doesn't give up any kind of structure. Instead, it means choosing a structure that actually serves your reading. One of the most practical ways to do this is to choose a reading goal that can run parallel to your normal reading. And most of us already have like a natural reading instinct. We have books and tastes that we already like. We're drawn to certain kinds of authors, certain kinds of genres, maybe even certain publishers. We're normally drawn to these without even trying. We just kind of instinctively pick these books up and read them. For me, that is Grit Lit and Southern Gothic, books like The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock, or The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. I don't need a goal to read these kinds of books. I'm already drawn to them. I'm well aware of them. I'm well aware of the authors that write these kinds of books and that are in these kinds of, literary circles. And it's just what I reach for naturally or instinctively. So instead of forcing myself to read more of what I already love, I just let that happen naturally. And then I set a secondary goal that kind of nudges me in a new direction or allows me to find some new things. So what that can look like in practice is that this past year, I put my secondary focus on crime and noir. Now, those are books that I had already liked a lot, but I hadn't really gone deeply into those genres for quite a long time. So I spent most of last year using my secondary reading to go deep into that genre. And that was alongside of the books that I was just kind of normally and naturally reading anyways. So between the books I would have already picked up, I would deliberately reach for a crime novel or a noir novel or other writers working in that tradition. So there's no magic number attached to it. There's no pressure to read a certain amount. It's just an intention to go deeper. My intention was to try to explore that genre a little more deeply than I normally would have. And I have to say it worked. Not because I read more, which I actually did, but it was just kind of a natural byproduct of it. But because my reading life actually felt alive again, I kind of had like a little reading project that I was working on. This coming year, I'm doing something similar, but now with science fiction. It's a genre that I've read a fair amount of when I was younger, but I drifted away from it. And now I'm curious about it again, not necessarily to catch up with what I feel like, I may have missed, and definitely not to optimize my reading, but to reconnect and to kind of rediscover the genre. And so I think you need to really be curious as a reader, and that curiosity is a really strong motivator when it comes to reading. Other qualitative goal ideas could be things like, besides just choosing a genre, you could choose a theme. You could choose books about memory, books about obsession, books about war, books about the aftermath of war, faith, identity, place. There's so many different things that you can explore as a reader. You can also choose kind of a more structured project, like Read Around the World. There's a really popular one where you try to read one book or one author from each different country or different regions. You can even choose a time period, like, mid-century novels. Like if you normally just read contemporary books, maybe you try to read books from, the mid-20th century or even the mid-19th century. And vice versa. If you normally just read kind of canon and classic novels, you might try to just read contemporary releases alongside what you would normally read. You could even choose to explore movements. There's modernism, there's postmodernism, there's romanticism, there's the Southern Gothic, and you can slowly explore what connects those movements and figure out what did they mean beyond just sort of textbook definitions. What are those books actually really like? I think the takeaway here is that none of these kinds of goals reward speed. Instead, they reward attention. And I think this really works a lot better for you as a reader. Qualitative goals do a couple of important things. They remove guilt. So if you read less than what you hoped, the goal still holds because finishing was never really the point. The number of books wasn't the point. It was just the type of books or the genre of books that you wanted to explore. It also helps create coherence. Your reading life starts to feel a lot more intentional rather than scattered. And it helps you reconnect reading to pleasure and reading for meaning and reading to explore. And like I said, reading out of curiosity. You stop asking questions like, am I on track? Or am I going to hit my goal? Or how long will it take me to finish this book? And instead, you start asking questions like, why should someone read this book? What did I get from this book? What will be the next book after this? Or where will this book take me? Or what are the new ideas that I picked up on in this book? And I think that those are really much higher quality questions to search answers for. So to kind of close it up here, reading just really shouldn't be something that needs to be optimized. It doesn't need to have dashboards or streaks or, fake productivity language. Can we please stop using productivity language to describe our reading? What our reading needs is, we need space, we need curiosity, and we need to give ourselves permission to slow down. And sometimes we have to actually set out to purposely slow ourselves down, or we just may never slow down. So if you're setting reading goals this year, or you're kind of rethinking maybe some goals that you already have, I'd really try to encourage you to try this kind of shift and to let quantity take care of itself, and instead just choose a new direction to go in instead. So if you set reading goals, I'm curious, are yours about numbers or about direction? Let me know in the comments below what kind of reading year you're aiming for this coming year.